are who you say you are. You'll do what you say you'll do. You'll be who you've always been to us, Jesus. Our hope is in you alone. Our strength in your mighty name. Our peace in the darkest day remains, Jesus. This we know, we will see the enemy run. This we know, we will see the victory come. We hold on to every promise you ever made. Jesus, you are unfailing. Our God, you will remain. Our joy in the heaviness. Our faith when it seems there is no way. Jesus. This we know, we will see the enemy run. This we know, we will see the victory come. We hold on to every promise you ever made. Jesus, you are unfailing. We trust you. Your ways are higher than our own. We trust you. We trust you. Your ways higher than our own. We trust you. Jesus, we trust you. Your ways higher than our own. We trust you. In all things we trust you. Your ways higher than our own. This we know. We will see the enemy run. This we know. We will see the victory come. We hold on to every promise you ever made. Jesus, you are unfailing. This we know. We will see the enemy run. This we know. We will see the victory come. We hold on to every promise you ever made. Jesus, you are unfailing. We trust you. We trust you. Your ways are higher than our own. We trust you. Jesus, we trust you. Your ways are higher than our own. We trust you. In all things we trust you. Your ways are higher than our own.
We're in a series of study through the Gospel of Luke. Today we're in Luke 19, verses 1 through 10. If you'd like to follow along in your Bible, your smartphone, your tablet, Luke 19, verses 1 through 10. Jesus visits Zacchaeus. Verse 1. He entered Jericho and was passing through, and there was a man named Zacchaeus who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but he was not able because of the crowd, since he was a short man. So running ahead, he climbed up in a sycamore tree to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because today it is necessary for me to stay at your house." So he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. All who saw it began to complain, "He's gone to stay with a sinful man." But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, Lord. And if I've extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much." "Today, salvation has come to this house," Jesus told him, "because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost." Now, as Jesus continues his journey to Jerusalem with his disciples, he's already explained at least 3 times exactly what's going to happen in Jerusalem when they get there. That Jesus would be tried, he'll be convicted, he'll be crucified, and then resurrected. But the disciples could not understand what Jesus was saying. Many in the crowd expected Jesus to overthrow the Roman government when he arrived in Jerusalem. Others were following along just because they wanted to see the next miracle. You know, there wasn't a lot of entertainment back then. But in this chapter, Luke makes a point to make it clear exactly what Jesus is all about. That Jesus is on a mission like no other. Jesus did not come to earth to be a good teacher. Jesus did not come to be a religious leader. He did not come just to be another prophet. Luke tells us exactly why Jesus came into the world, and we see it in verse 10. "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost." Everything in the Old Testament points to that truth. Everything in the New Testament supports that truth, that Jesus came into the world to rescue sinners. His mission was made clear even before he was born. We can read it in Matthew 1. In verse 21, the angel Gabriel announced, "She will give birth to a son, and you are to name him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." In 1 John 3:5, the Apostle John said, "You know that he was revealed so that he might take away sins." 1 Timothy 1:15, the Apostle Paul said, "Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, and I am the worst of them." We studied a few months ago in Luke 15 where there are 3 parables: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son, or the lost son. And all 3 of these parables emphasized Jesus' mission to seek and to save the lost. You know, we don't find God. It's God's amazing grace that finds us. And the simple story of Zacchaeus is a clear picture of that seeking grace, that saving grace, that finding grace of God. One of my favorite songs that we sing here at Argyle is "Your Grace Finds Me." It's there on a wedding day there in the weeping by the graveside, there in the very breath we breathe, your great grace. The same for the rich and poor, the same for the saint and for the sinner, enough for this whole wide world. Your great grace. Oh, such grace. From the creation to the cross, there from the cross into eternity, your grace finds me. Yes, your grace finds me. God's finding grace is a beautiful thing. Verse 1. He entered Jericho and was passing through. So Jesus and his disciples, along with the crowd, are walking through the city of Jericho, heading to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is about another 15 miles away. Verse 2. There was a man named Zacchaeus who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Now, this is the sixth and final time, if you're keeping score, that Luke talks about the tax collectors. Now, let's understand that our tax collectors today are wonderful people. You don't want to mess with them. It's not a good thing. But in Jesus' day, there was no group of people, there was no profession that was more despised or more hated than the tax collectors. The tax collectors were traitors to their own people. They were Jewish and they'd sold out to the Roman government. And they were allowed to charge any amount of tax that they wanted to charge. And then they could keep the extra for themselves. So they were dishonest. They were selfish. They were thieves. And Zacchaeus wasn't just a tax collector. He was the chief tax collector. That meant that he was more crooked than all the rest, because extreme dishonesty would get you promoted. The text also tells us that he was rich. And because he was the chief tax collector, the other tax collectors would pay him part of what they received. The way the system was set up, you could become very, very wealthy being a tax collector. But there were some consequences. Tax collectors were considered unclean, and they were not allowed to even come into the synagogue. They couldn't even come into the church. They couldn't associate with anyone other than other tax collectors and other known sinners. Now, it's strange that the name Zacchaeus actually means righteous, because there's nothing righteous about Zacchaeus. Verse 3. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but he was not able because of the crowd, and since he was a short man. Now, Zacchaeus really wanted to see Jesus. Some of it might have been curiosity, but I think there's more to it than that. It's obvious that God is working in his heart, and he realized that he needed to change. And he was wondering if maybe Jesus had the answer to real life change from the inside out. But there were two things that were keeping him from seeing Jesus. There was a big crowd, and he was a small person. But he was determined to see Jesus, so he got creative. Verse 4. So running ahead, he climbed up a sycamore tree to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. Now, first, let's talk a moment about sycamore trees. Now, for the record, I love trees. I think they're beautiful. So don't send me emails about how I'm a tree hater. I love trees. But there are two trees in particular that I don't like. I don't like trees that tear up our church parking lot. I got a problem with that. And then I don't like trees that have leaves the size of a small car. Have you ever seen a sycamore leaf? Trust me, I have. They're huge. And we are blessed or cursed to have two big sycamores in our backyard that I can't get anybody to cut down. And so I have raked literally hundreds, maybe thousands of bags of sycamore leaves, and I don't like it. Now, I just wish that Zacchaeus had climbed up another kind of tree instead of making the sycamore biblical. Now, while I'm on it, no oak trees either, because they are messing up our parking lot. Now, all right, I feel better now. So, he climbed the tree, and he waited for Jesus to come by. Verse 4, so running ahead, he climbed up a sycamore tree to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because today it is necessary for me to stay at your house. Can you believe it? Jesus actually stopped and looked Zacchaeus in the eyes, and then Jesus even called him by name. Now, they had never met before, but Jesus knew Zacchaeus just like he knows each one of us, which reminds me of another song. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls, and he hears me when I call. And then Jesus invites himself to dinner. And Zacchaeus is so stunned, he almost falls out of the tree. Verse 6. So he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. And here we see the difference between the compassion, the acceptance, the love of Jesus, and the snootiness of self-righteous church people. You see, the church people were thrilled that Jesus was hanging out with Zacchaeus, right? No. Church people, what are you going to do with them? Verse 7. All who saw it began to complain. He's gone to stay with a sinful man. Now, the word complain here is a very strong, intense word. It means to grumble nonstop. Now, one of the most draining things that every leader has to deal with is the complaining and grumbling of his people. And no matter what decision you make, someone is going to be unhappy. But that's just part of leadership. And that's why some people are not willing to lead. In the Bible, I think of my main man, Moses. God bless him. He endured constant, continual complaining, murmuring, and grumbling. It got so bad that this is what Moses said to God in Numbers 11, verse 14. I cannot carry all these people by myself. They are too much for me. If you're going to treat me like this, please kill me right now. That's what complaining does to people. But the cool thing about the Zacchaeus story, Jesus could care less about the complaining and the grumbling. Why? Because Jesus knew exactly what his mission was. And he was completely committed to the mission. Now, I don't know about Jake and Elwood's mission, but Jesus was on a mission for God. Now, we don't have the details of everything that Jesus said to Zacchaeus. I wish we did, because I bet it was good. But we do see real life change through Jesus from the inside out. Something happened to Zacchaeus. He changed. Verse 8. But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, Lord, and if I've extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much." See, the life change that we see in Zacchaeus was in the biggest area of issues and problems in his life. His possessions, his selfishness, his lack of generosity. Many times, when people want to change and get right with God and live for God, the last thing to change, the last thing they are willing to surrender is in the area of giving and generosity. You see, church people have learned how to fake it. They've learned how to appear spiritual on Sunday. By the way, as I look at y'all, you look real spiritual. Congratulations. But in the area of giving and generosity, it is impossible to fake it. Either you give or you don't. Either you're generous or you're not. We know that real life change happened in Zacchaeus' heart because he surrendered to God the thing that had the strongest hold on his life, his stuff. But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, Lord, and if I've extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much." Zacchaeus was completely transformed. That's what happens when you meet Jesus. He experienced real life change through Jesus from the inside out. And the thief became an honest person. The selfish person became generous. The taker became a giver. Verse 9. Today, salvation has come to this house, Jesus told him, because he too is a son of Abraham. Now, he was already a son of Abraham by birth, and now he's a son of Abraham by faith. Salvation has come to him, and nothing will ever, ever be the same again. Verse 10, "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost." That means that Jesus is inviting all of us today to come down out of our tree. And what is it that has its grips on your life? What have you been hanging on to? What are you hiding behind? What's your excuse? The grace of Jesus is seeking you. God is in the business of changing people's stories. And together, through the power of God, like Zacchaeus, we can change the story. Came